From Lagos, the nation's commercial capital, this is the News at 10. Live from Channels Television. Reporting tonight, Ijoma Onyato.
Hello and welcome. Senate recommends 1% of proceeds from the value-added tax for the rebuilding of infrastructure destroyed in states in the aftermath of the SARS protests. Leaders of the South-South region demand urgent reforms in Nigeria's structure, describe recent SARS protests as a wake-up call. CBN Monetary Policy Committee leaves key lending rates unchanged as part of moves to stimulate the economy towards recovery from recession. And after weeks of foot dragging, President Trump gives nod to U.S. government's transition process as President-elect Joe Biden announces first set of cabinet members. Plus we'll have business, sports and later on news from our studios in London.
On business news tonight, Federal Inland Revenue Service rakes in 4.178 trillion naira from tax revenue in 10 months, more than 98% target for the year 2020.
On sports news tonight, Minister of Youth and Sports Development, Sunday Dare, meets with the Nigeria Football Federation to demand improved performance from the Super Eagles head coach, Gernot Rohr.
We begin tonight with the efforts by the upper legislative house to restore the economic fortunes of the nation in the aftermath of the SARS protests. The senators today request the federal government to compensate the states where massive destruction took place during the protest. They recommend that 1% of proceeds from the value-added tax be set aside for the states. The lawmakers made the recommendation during today's plenary after their resumption from recess. Our correspondent Linda Akigbe reports.
The National Assembly was on recess when the country witnessed massive destruction of properties and infrastructure following the shooting by soldiers at the Lekki Toll Plaza in Lagos in the attempt to disperse SARS protesters there. At the resumption of legislative proceedings on Tuesday, two federal lawmakers called the attention of their colleagues to the level of destruction to public and private properties across the country in the aftermath of the protests.
Concerned that the alleged shooting of protesters further infuriated protesters and tension flared with consequent violent protests and the beginning of wanton looting and destruction of public and private assets all over the country, and particularly Lagos, the epicenter of all the protests. Worried that the private and public assets destroyed by hoodlums in Lagos was estimated to be in the region of 1 trillion naira.
The Senate is worried that despite the 24-hour curfew, a group of vandals on the next day, being 24th October, invaded over 120 properties in Calabar and vandalized, looted, burnt down some high-valued properties belonging to individuals, the state government, and the federal government.
Expectedly, the motion solicited contributions from legislators.
I believe that we've not done enough to protect the interests of the young people of this country. We still owe them responsibility to provide them jobs and a secured future. Because unless that happens, we'll continue to experience this kind of agitation and protest. The second is, it means that the security men we have in this country have been overstressed and possibly not enough. So this time for us to begin to consider what some of us have been talking about, which is the decentralization of our police sector, so that each state should be able to have the number and the quality of police they need.
As the SARS victims are being compensated, so also the victims of banditry where hoodlums also attacked homes, burned down their properties, cut away their livelihoods, should also be compensated.
Federal lawmakers want the federal government to compensate states affected by the violence and destruction in the aftermath of the protest with 1% of proceeds from the value-added tax. Linda Akibi, Channels Television News.
Meanwhile, the judicial panel of inquiry sitting on a matter in Enugu State has received 45 petitions for consideration. According to the chairman of the panel, Justice Kingsley Ude, 15 out of the 45 cases have been called with dates issued for hearing. He also explained that the Bar Association in Enugu has agreed to work pro bono for any of the petitioners who cannot afford a lawyer.
In this course list, we have 45 cases which we slated for call over and then adjourn for proper hearing. We had 45 cases in the course list. We were able to take care of 15 of the 45 cases. The 15 cases we dealt with today have not been disposed of finally. We just called them over and adjourned them for definite hearing.
A federal high court in Abuja has commenced the trial in absentia of the former chairman of the defunct pension reform task team, Abdul Rashid Maina, for alleged money laundering. Justice Okonabang began the trial of Mr. Maina and his company, Common Inputs Limited, today, but both parties were absent in court. Both Mr. Maina and his company were also not represented by their lawyers. The court also ordered the revocation of the bail granted to Mr. Maina's son, Faisal Abdul Rashid Maina, who was also standing trial for alleged fraud to the tune of 58 million naira. Mr. Faisal Maina is accused of operating accounts that were used as conduits for illegal transactions. Justice Abang also ordered Mr. Faisal Maina's surety to appear in court at the next sitting as he adjourned further trial to tomorrow, November the 25th. And as a result of their absence, Justice Abang foreclosed the rights to cross-examine the prosecution witness who was present in court. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission is prosecuting Mr. Maina for alleged money laundering to the tune of 2 billion naira. Justice Abang, after listening to the testimony of the sixth prosecution witness, adjourned the matter to November the 25th for continuation of trial. Nigeria's Apex Bank is looking at the quickest way to economic recovery in the country. Today, the Monetary Policy Committee of the CBN resolved to keep the lending rate unchanged, a move the CBN says will engender economic growth and a sustainable recovery from the recession.
It's the sixth and final Monetary Policy Committee meeting for the year. Journalists are on ground to hear the decisions reached by the Apex Bank as it seeks to recover the country's economy from recession, the second under 5 years. Given details of the decisions reached, the central bank governor explains why the committee unanimously voted to keep all key economic parameters unchanged.
The committee decided by a unanimous vote to retain all parameters. In summary, MPC voted 1. to retain MPR at 11.5%, 2. retain asymmetric corridor of minus 100 and plus 100 and minus 700 basis points around the MPR, and 3. retain CRR at 27.5%, and 4. retain the liquidity ratio at 30%.
Speaking on the plans to recover the economy, he says that both the monetary and fiscal authorities had anticipated the recession by developing policies and programs aimed at reflating the economy.
In view of these considerations, the choices before the committee were focused whether on the need to tighten the stance of policy to address rising price levels, recognizing its primary mandate of price stability, to support output recovery, or to to allow existing policy initiatives to permeate the economy.
The Apex Bank governor also rules out the plans to expand its intervention programs.
We also proposed that for targeted credit facilities to households and small-scale businesses that are adversely impacted by COVID-19, that we're going to put on the table 50 billion naira for them. These are unsecured facilities meant for people who we feel are impacted and they just needed some little money, either to start business or conduct some kind of consumption so as to help them live their lives during the period of pandemic.
The rise in inflation, according to him, will likely abate in the medium term as domestic production is expected to recover following the resumption of economic activities post-COVID-19 lockdowns.
Well, we'll have more on the MPC meeting and its implication, looking at the decision a little bit later on in the bulletin. But let's move on a bit now. And the governor of Kaduna State, Nasir El-Rufai, is questioning the zoning theory, claiming that the logic behind it is no longer favorable to the country. Addressing the 26th Nigerian Economic Summit Group in Abuja, he insists the country is now on the threshold where equal opportunities for all is imperative. He joined voices with other panelists in the call for the constitution of state police, state judicial council, as well as the control of resources under states. Our correspondent Gloria Umezuoke reports.
A fresh conversation on rethinking subnational competitiveness is set for the second day of the 26th Nigerian Economic Summit in Abuja. The governor of Kaduna State set off with an explicit call for a re-examination of the nation's constitutional arrangement.
Until we as state governors move away from the mentality of waiting for checks from Abuja to get on with governance, I think we'll continue to underperform as a country.
In a separate dimension, senior advocate of Nigeria, Professor Azuka Azinge, calls into question the appointment of the chairmanship of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, by the president.
Should the president really appoint, or should he be appointed by an independent organization? At the conference, there was a lot of ideas whether the NJC should appoint the chairman of INEC. I think that the chairmanship of INEC that's supposed to produce for us credible, excellent candidates to governors, the people must have a say.
By the same token, she suggests that zoning remains a fair deal for all, a point the governor contradicts.
I'm sorry, madam. I'm sorry. I don't think we should hide behind fairness and say that everyone must be equal. The best we can do is to give people equal opportunity. You've gone as far as say that in a state, the governorship should rotate around senatorial district. That is absurd. Nobody does that. There is no country in the world that has made progress in the last 50 years that picks its leaders based on where they come from. I think if we move away from this fixation about distribution, hiding behind one finger of fairness, to selecting or picking the best person to get the job done.
Devolving powers to the state has been a recurring conversation at forums like this. Failure to do this, many believe, will disempower states for substantive growth in the nearest future. Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
In part two, after the break, CBN Monetary Policy Committee leaves key lending rates unchanged, and we'll have the CEO of Financial Derivatives Company, Mr. Bismarck Rewane, to examine the implications of that. That's in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back. If you've just joined us, you're watching the news at 10 on Channels Television, coming to you live from Lagos. A reminder of our top stories. Senate recommends 1% of proceeds from value-added tax for the rebuilding of infrastructure destroyed in states in the aftermath of the SARS protests. Leaders of the South-South region demand urgent reforms in Nigeria's structure, describe recent SARS protests as a wake-up call. CBN Monetary Policy Committee leaves key lending rates unchanged as part of moves to stimulate the economy towards recovery from recession. And after weeks of foot dragging, President Trump gives nod to U.S. government transition process as President-elect Joe Biden announces first set of cabinet members. Now let's get a bit of perspective on today's MPC meeting as well as economic recovery. I'm now being joined on the news at 10 by the CEO of financial derivatives company, Mr. Bismarck Rewane. Thanks a lot for joining us, Mr. Rewane. Great to have you in the chair on a day like this, I always say. So key lending rates unchanged in the face of a recession. Will this end the problem, in your opinion?
First of all, in Latin we say nihil sum mutare. In French we say pas de changement. And in English, we say no change. So 14 times out of the last 17 meetings, status quo, ante, no change. So it's become deja vu. And so what's the decision? Leave everything unchanged. But the good news is that in the global economy, we have a vaccine. 2, the price of oil got as high as $46 a barrel today. So that's the recovery. Seems to be on an optimistic note. But the bad news is that we have inflation today at 14.23, heading towards 15 or 16%. But food inflation, 17.25. Inflation is everything as far as central banking and monetary policy is about. The framework is called inflation targeting. So that's important. Second is that this inflation has many factors that are stoking it. One of those being the exchange rate weakness. And we'll talk about the exchange rate in a minute. Thirdly, GDP growth recovering, minus 3.6%. It was minus 6. Nigeria is doing well compared to others, and the recovery is probably on track. I'm not as optimistic as others that will say the recovery will happen in next quarter, but it definitely will happen in 2021. The worst news is that unemployment is at 27% and is likely to get to 35%. So that's key. Now, some other things about money supply growth and all that, we'll leave that. But the key thing is inflation. And if you look at inflation, the slides there tell you very clearly that the smallest, actually the smallest stoking factor is the VAT increase. The highest stoking factor happens to be the exchange rate pass-through. For every 1% devaluation of the currency, there's a 0.2% increase in prices. And so, but when you have high inflation and low interest rates, then the store of value of the currency begins to erode. So there's no question about it. Inflation at 14, 15%, interest rates at 1%, you lose money by going to bed, right? And that's 14%. And that's very, very important. And that also leads to currency pressures. Nominally, the value of the currency is 386. Effectively, the value of the currency is what you get in the market. Prices are not determined on television. Prices are not determined on pages of newspapers. Prices are determined in the marketplace. If you cannot get it in the market, the effective price is in the market. In economics, we say there's the invisible hand which determines the price. In intervention, we say there's a hidden hand. So you can have the hidden hand trying to intervene. It will not succeed. It's the invisible hand that always succeeds at the end. So what is the price of the currency? On the way here, you could buy it at 386 if you're lucky. But the price at which you get it in the marketplace is what it is. If it is 480 in the market, that's what it is. That's what we call effective price. There's nothing emotional about pricing. It is a rational decision. I'd love it to be one-to-one. I'd love it to be, whatever it is. But the reality is that if I want to buy onions today, onions is 80,000 naira a bag. And that's the effective price. If I want to buy the dollar today, I'll buy it at a particular price. And I'm not going to say that on television, but the price is what it is. It is not what we wish it is. All right? Now, unemployment, we've talked about that. And that comes, one of the consequences of a recession is that it comes with corporate failure, it comes with high unemployment. But luckily, we are having a recovery path. So sometime next year, maybe in the second quarter or so, we'll see that. But it all depends on the price of oil and if OPEC gives us some slack.
So we're going to see recovery there?
We're going to see recovery in 2021. Not early 2021, but probably in the middle. Okay. Some are more optimistic, but these are all projections. Now, but Nigeria is not alone. If you look at those slides, Nigeria minus 3.62, South Africa is minus 51, Ghana is minus 0.8, Kenya is minus 9. So everybody is in this, but Nigeria is technically in recession, 2 consecutive quarters of negative growth. Now, what's the impact of all of this on you? Clearly, one, if you're a corporate body, you are looking for Forex. Forex rationing does not help you. So you are buying part of it officially, buying part of it and blending it to come up with a rate. In the non-deliverable forward market, you are seeing it at 4.47 for 1 year forwards, and that's a technical issue. Secondly, credit availability. Credit is available. The central bank governor alluded to the fact that 19.3 trillion naira. It's about flat there. And then the price of credit has actually declined. But it's 20%. Don't forget, interest rates are 1% and lending rates are 20%. That's now, what does this mean? If the 10 commodities we track, of these 10, 3 are flat and 7 have increased. The biggest culprit here is price of onions. And if you look at, as an individual, you are paying more for petrol, you are paying more for flour. The price of flour has gone from 8,500 last year and it's going to go up to 15,000 in December 1. So the price of bread is going to be up by 90% between last year and this year. But what is important is transport fares in the city. Within the city, it's 68%. That's within Lagos and within Ibadan or within Kano. But across cities, it's 36%. But what is interesting is that on Okadas and the tricycles, it's gone up by 115%. Okay. And that's where the poor man gets hurt. And those are the things that stoke tension. Now, having said that, what do you expect to happen? One, Q4 growth is going to decline because it's base year effects between, at this time last year, COVID had started, but it was not here, it was in China. But the slowdown has started in economic activities. So to that extent, when you compare Q4 last year with Q4 this year, the base year effects means that we would not be as bad. Oil price, $45 a barrel, that's good for us. There could be a second surge, but I think Nigerians we have been lucky, and finally, there'll be a mild Christmas. So in the end, interest rates will probably increase next year. The central bank will have a way and will have to alter that. The central bank will have to sell more dollars into the market if you are going to increase output. And finally, inflation will cross the 15%, but will then moderate later in the year. So 2021 is going to be a better year than 2020. But again, everything depends on what happens with the vaccine, the price of oil, and how determined we are to call a spade a spade.
Thank you so much for that projection. Always a pleasure, Mr. Rewani, CEO of Financial Derivatives Company. Thanks for sharing that on the news at 10 tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Now, anger and deep pain could best describe the feelings of the leaders of the Niger Delta states when the first scheduled meeting with the federal government failed to hold. But the mood is different today as the delegation of the federal government finally arrived in Port Harcourt, the River State capital, to meet with leaders of the region. The governors minced no words in their demands for true federalism and restructuring of the country.
The federal government delegation is led by the President's Chief of Staff, Professor Ibrahim Gambari, accompanied by the Deputy Senate President, Ovioma Agege, the Inspector General of Police, and ministers from the region. They're in Port Harcourt, the River State capital, for an interactive session with the South-South governors and other leaders from the region. Governor Nyesom Wike welcomes the guest as Officer Gambari then sets the tone for the meeting as the Inspector General of Police provides statistics of casualties and destruction in the South-South in the aftermath of the SARS protest.
Mr. President has tasked members of this cabinet to ensure that his commitment with regards to the SARS process are fully executed. He, however, also warned that the right of citizens to protest must be respected and protected.
54 government facilities were attacked. while 23 government warehouses were looted. In addition, 53 private and corporate facilities were attacked, while 21 civilians lost their lives in the SARS protests in this region.
Governor Kowan notes that the SARS protest was a call for the Nigerian state to address pending issues as it reels out some demands by the South-South.
1. True federalism and devolution of power to the states, including states creating and managing their own police and security architecture under a federal structure, as it is in all federal and some non-federal systems in the world.
Senator Ovioma Ogege assures the region of legislative support for their demand through constitutional amendment.
Most of the issues that have been raised now, that have been canvassed, most of them are issues for constitutional amendment. They are issues for constitutional review. Yes, we are a delegation of Mr. President, who is the chief executive, but the last time I checked, and most of us here who are lawyers will also know that going through the provisions of the Constitution, Mr. President does not hold any fiat.
Other stakeholders re-echoed the position of the South-South governors as they bear their minds.
All of us agree that the Nigeria police has been stretched beyond measure. And we believe that there is no longer any rational basis for the delay in the implementation of what has become a national consensus, that what is required in our nation is to have both the federal and the state and even local government police or security agencies.
People may not want to hear it now and may not want to say it, but it has to be said. It has to be said that the political power must shift, and the only way it's going to shift is for us to have a restructured Nigeria.
With the interaction done, the presidential delegation assures the South-South region's leadership that their demands have been noted and their request will be presented to the president. From Port Harcourt, Jeffrey Uzongo, Channels Television News.
A lot of them could not access.
When the news at 10 returns, we'll take a look at the proceedings of judicial panels on the restitution of victims of SARS in Lagos. Plus, the Federal Inland Revenue Service rakes in 4 trillion naira from tax revenue in 10 months, more than a percentage target for 2020. That's on business. To join us again. Welcome back to the news at 10. One of the petitioners, Mr. Basil Ijuagu, who is scheduled to be heard today at the Lagos Judicial Panel of Restitution for Victims of SARS, is dead. His cousin, Chukwu Vincent, who testified before the panel, said he died exactly a week ago on November the 17th, 2020. Mr. Ijuagu was listed as the third petitioner to be heard, but when his case was called, his counsel told the panel that the petitioner is no more. We lost him last week as a result of the torture meted out to him by SARS. He asked the panel to allow him instead call on a family member to testify. At this point, the counsel representing the police raised an objection to the effect that it can't be proven that his death was directly caused by the torture from SARS as it took place a while ago. The chairman of the panel, Justice Doris Ekuwobi, agreed and struck out the statement. The court then listened to the testimony of Mr. Chukwu Vincent, a businessman who describes himself as a cousin of the victim.
So on his way going back from the work on that particular day, according to him, he said he was arrested by men of Nigeria police with their own Korope. There's one particular bus, this smaller bus they used to call Korope bus. So he was arrested around a place called Ego at the Igondo area of Lagos State. So while they arrested him, they took him to Igondo police station, while he spent 5 days with the police in that particular Igondo police station, of which there they use hammer, they use big iron hammer, they pieces the 2 legs of this particular person. We have the pictures anyway. So then damage the 2 legs, the bones of the leg. And thereafter the 5 days, they now took him out of the station at Igondu to the SARS office in Ikeja, where he spent another days making it all from that night of May. He was released on the 31st of
you said he was taken to, just calm down, sir.
He was taken to SARS office.
You said he was taken to Ikeja, SARS office.
Yes.
At that place, what happened to him?
Okay, at that place, it was when we knew what happened to him again, because in that place now, he was released on the 31st of that month. When we got there, we see that all his head was broken with according to he said it's gone, that police used to break all his head, because there was all damage and serious wound and bleeding all over his head.
You said it was released on 13th. 31st of
May.
When? What year?
2014.
So immediately after, what happened to the deceased?
Then thereafter, because by this time, at this point now, he couldn't walk anymore.
Because of the injuries sustained?
Yes, he can never even remember certain things again. So we started taking him from hospital to hospital.
Nine Payment Service Bank says it's set to bridge the gap in banking and solve financial exclusion plaguing the system in Nigeria. The Chief Executive Officer of 9 PSB, who made this known at the official launch of the bank in Lagos, says banking has been made easy with 9 PSB, where accounts can be on the mobile phone by simply dialing *990# to launch the platform that easily gets you started.
Present in this hall for the official launch of 9 Payment Service Bank, 9 PSB, are representatives from the telecommunications sector, diplomats, royal fathers, and other members of society. 9 PSB says that it has come to revolutionize banking and solve problems of financial exclusion, a huge deficit that exists.
Instant is the key word. You are not going to wait for the end of the month to get your cash back. Instantly, what that means is that the more you transact on our platform, the more you get cash back to your account.
To further drive home what 9 PSB brings in a financially challenged environment, a drama presentation is staged. As depicted here, persons including peasant farmers, traders in spare parts, stylists, and many others have been discouraged with various bank charges and unfriendly practices, which 9 PSB says it is set to change.
I feel that is where 9 PSB can take a quick stand to educate prospective customers or the public in general on how this works, why this is different from your regular bank, and why we should trust.
A total solution begins with a customer's last 10 digits of their mobile numbers, which automatically becomes their bank accounts.
When people come to trust you, when you deliver on your promises, you would actually get more customers going around with word of mouth advertising for you.
In his goodwill message, the Emir of Bichi in Kano, His Royal Highness Nasiru Adobayero II, who is the chairman of 9 PSB, believes that the future for the banking system has come.
We have embarked on a next phase of progress, transformation, and expansion.
There is more clarity needed from journalists on the operations of 9 PSB, and the Chief Executive Officer leads a team to respond to the questions raised.
This is our bank. We are a bank for everyone. So no matter what phone number you have or what network provider you are using, you're welcome.
Get up on 9 PSB wherever you are.
9 Payment Service Bank says everyone, no matter how big or small, has a place to help adjust to a new normal, with banking made easy and accessible to all.
For the rest of the business news, here's Anne Waudu.
Banking so easy, so simple. Dial *894# now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Thank you, Ijoma. Hello and welcome to Business News. The Federal Inland Revenue Service has raked in 4.178 trillion naira revenue out of the 4.239 trillion naira target it set for itself between January and October this year. At a media chat with journalists in Abuja, the chairman of FIRS, Mr. Mohammed Nami, says the agency has contributed over 3.8 trillion naira of its revenue quota for this year, sharing by the Federal Accounts Allocation Committee.
A total of 503 billion was shared at the FAC meeting last week. And out of this amount, 310 billion came from FIRS, which represents 62%. Nigeria Custom contributed 13%, DPR 22%, and NNPC 3%. So we have a problem in this country, and we want you to help us to talk to Nigerians that the only way to go going forward is this tax revenue, and we cannot afford to leave them in the hand of agents. As they collect them, we want them to remit it to the coffers. If you look at it from a cumulative perspective, from January to date, total revenue contributed to FAC by the four agencies responsible, which is NNPC, DPR, Nigeria Consumer ourselves, stood at 6.1 trillion naira. And out of this 6.1 trillion, 3.8 trillion came from FIRS, that is 63% of the money.
International Breweries PLC, organizers of Kickstart, a youth empowerment program, says it will do more to increase and sustain youth participation in its projects in a bid to alleviate poverty among youths from 18 to 35 years old. The managing director of the company, Higo Dias, says that he said this at Kickstart's entrepreneurial summit right here in Lagos. According to him, the uniqueness of this year's edition, which is the 5th held yearly, is easily appreciated from the COVID-19 pandemic and the recent protest in Nigeria.
This time last year, they had told us.
This year's young entrepreneurs groomed by the Kickstart initiative of International Breweries PLC are able to overcome headwinds through intensive mentorship program. The message by the managing director on this day is simple: help the youth in eradicating poverty in a challenging business environment.
A program designed to help upscale the skills of young entrepreneurs and further demonstrate our organization's commitment to the development of the Nigerian youth.
The Entrepreneurship Summit brought together experienced hands, one of whom is Dr. Doyin Salami. For him, entrepreneurs must see beyond the challenges of any business and focus on the opportunities captured in 3 broad areas.
Irrespective of the difficulty of the environment, those who are astute enough, those who are careful enough, those who are observant enough, will spot the opportunity.
One thing I know that government can do, we beg for power, we beg for a lot of these things we can substitute. But this multiplicity of taxes and levies and the constant almost breathing down on entrepreneurs, we have to find a way to come around it.
But the hope for the future, according to the organizers, is already being felt as some of its beneficiaries testify.
Kickstart impacted my business because, for one, I haven't been to a business school yet. So it was like the first foundation for me to really understand the difference between knowing something, having the knowledge, and then knowing the business behind it.
For the management, the future can only get better with doubling and even tripling the 708 young entrepreneurs who got a chance at life with a Kickstart.
We are focusing 100% on young people. This is where we have not just the energy and the innovation that we're looking for, but it's also where we have the greatest challenges.
We promote solutions that are linked to recycling. We promote entrepreneurship jobs in the area of education, in the area of health.
There are currently 41.5 million MSMEs in Nigeria, with the views that if each one could employ one youth and the government provides electricity and address over taxation, then perhaps the issue of unemployment may be overcome.
After a 5-day disappearance, the bulls made a quick comeback today at the equities market at the close of trading as total volume of shares transactions dropped by 35.7%. Ekaite Afia has the details.
Hello and welcome to the Stock Market Report. In line with traders' expectation, the equities market returned to its winning ways as the bull tossed the bear side, ending its 5-day dominance at the NSE. Now, at the close of today's trading session, the market's benchmark indicator jumped by more than 0.5%, well into the 34,000 level after investors took advantage of the low price of some blue chip stocks. And the result is a 114 billion naira gain in the total value of listed equities. The quick rebound in today's session is attributed to gains from 26 equities across the 5 key sectors of the market, in particular the banking counter with the likes of FBN Holdings, UBA, and Access Bank as key factors. However, the volume of equities traded was lower by almost half of Monday's turnover, as 365.41 million shares worth 4.69 billion naira changed hands in over 6,300 transactions. I must say the stock market remains unpredictable, but one thing is certain: investors always get good returns for their investment within a short period. Well, thanks for joining us for the Stock Market Report. I'm Ekaite Afia.
Well, it's a historic day for U.S. stock markets, but let's find out if all the other markets had a lucky day. And that's Business News Tonight. Thank you for watching. I'm Anne Nwawadu. The rest of the news at 10 continues with Ijoma.
Banking so easy, so simple. Dial *894# now to experience it. You first, First Bank.
Thanks a lot, Anne. U.S. President-elect Joe Biden has introduced several of his national security nominees, making a reversal of President Donald Trump's America First foreign policy by saying he picks anybody whose core believes that America is the strongest when it works with its allies. Now let's head over to our London studio with Simon Pusey and around the world in 5.
Good evening and welcome to the Channel Studios here in London with your international news around the world in 5. US President Donald Trump has accepted a formal US transition should begin for President-elect Joe Biden to take office.
Very unfair act for the United States.
Mr. Trump said the federal agency overseeing the handover must do what needs to be done, but he hasn't conceded defeat and has vowed to keep contesting the election result. The General Services Administration said it was acknowledging Mr. Biden as the apparent winner. It came as Mr. Biden's victory in the state of Michigan was officially certified, which comes as a major blow to Mr. Trump. The president-elect will now have access to top security briefings, office space and government officials as he prepares to take office on the 20th of January.
The people of this nation have spoken.
Police in France have violently dismantled a makeshift migrant camp in the heart of Paris overnight, clashing with migrants and activists in the process. Dozens of small tents were removed from Place de la République in the centre of the capital, with occupants sometimes being forcibly removed by police. Police later used tear gas and chased people through the streets, beating some with batons. The new camp appeared a week after police had dismantled a bigger illegal migrant campsite near the French National Sports Stadium in northern Paris. Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin tweeted that some of the scenes were shocking and ordered the police to provide a full report of their actions. The United Nations has warned that greenhouse gas concentrations climbed to a new record in 2019 and rose again this year. That's despite an expected drop in emissions due to worldwide lockdowns. Many scientists expect the biggest annual fall in carbon emissions in generations this year as a side effect of the measures put in place to contain the coronavirus. But the UN described the projected 2020 as a tiny blip. According to the organisation, the resulting impact on the carbon dioxide concentration and global warming would be no bigger than normal annual fluctuations. Australia's airline Qantas will insist in future that international travellers have a COVID-19 vaccination before they fly, describing the move as a necessity.
That we will ask people to have a vaccination before they can get on the aircraft.
The Australian flag carrier's boss, Alan Joyce, said the move would be a necessity when vaccines are available. Australia shut down its international borders early in the pandemic and required those returning to quarantine. The country has more recently relied on lockdowns, widespread testing and aggressive contact tracing to push daily infections nationwide close to zero. China has hailed as a success its launch of a robot spacecraft to bring back rocks from the moon. The Chinese launch is the first bid by any country to retrieve lunar surface samples since the 1970s. The China National Space Administration called the launch a success and said in a statement the rocket flew for nearly 37 minutes before sending the spacecraft on its intended trajectory. The Chang'e 5 mission, named after the ancient Chinese goddess of the moon, will seek to collect lunar material to help scientists understand more about the moon's origins and formation. The mission will test China's ability to remotely acquire samples from space ahead of more complex missions. And finally, meet the South Korean mountain hikers who are making junk art to encourage others not to litter as social distancing measures drive more people from the cities to the hills. Clean Hikers is a group dedicated to picking up trash from mountain parks and turning the collection into art. The group's latest creation is a collage of a crying cat tagged with the slogan "Save the World" on the summit of Mount Mani on Ganghwa Island. Other works include collages made of discarded face masks, bottles, and even running shoes that depict a fish, bird, butterfly, and a boy. After the works are created and documented, the garbage is thrown away in proper rubbish bins or taken to be recycled. And that's your international news around the world in 5. Now back to the Channel studios in Lagos.
Thanks a lot, Simon. Some sports now. Here's Olumide Macaulay.
Thank you, Jonah. Hello and welcome to Sports News. Circus performer and skating teacher Tinuke Oyediran has been celebrated across the world for her stellar achievements while standing on 4 wheels. During the recent Guinness World Records Day, an annual celebration of record breaking, the professional skater broke 2 new records.
Tinuke Oyediran, more commonly known as Tinuke's Orbit to her 12,500 social media followers, is a skating sensation who has just twirled her way into the Guinness World Records. The former circus performer's skills are so rare, she managed to bag not 1, but 2 of the famed accolades.
I did 2 Guinness World Records in one day. The first one was for as many cartwheels as I could do on roller skates in 1 minute, and the second one was as many spins on e-skates as I could do in 1 minute. I got 30 on the cartwheels and 70 on the spins.
For many of us, you go to one roller skating party when you're a child, you put the skates down, never to be seen again. How did it become a profession for you?
Yeah, so basically I started off as a dancer, a trained dancer, and then I went into a show called Starlight Express where they taught me how to roller skate. It was a very glitz, glam musical, and I did that for 2 years and skated literally every single day for 2 years. When I came back to London, I started up my own company teaching people how to roller skate and performing literally worldwide at the moment. It's just amazing.
Fast forward to 2020 and she says that achieving both of these records has made her lockdown dreams a reality.
I've actually been teaching roller skating and stuff like that in lockdown as well, online, which has been amazing, and I've managed to be teaching people all over the world rather than just in London, and that has been such a blessing. I've seen people progress in my classes in Italy, literally as far as America as well. So I'm really excited to get some more classes started up in January. Please do have a look on my channel. It's Tinuke's _orbit. You can find me on Instagram, and I'm going to be starting up a whole bunch of classes on there and teaching the world how to roller skate and just expressing that love and that joy.
Juliana Olayinka, reporting for Channels Television News in London.
Our London correspondent Juliana Olayinka speaking there to Tinuke Oyediran, the Guinness World Record holder in skating. Now to football, where Chelsea sealed their progress to the UEFA Champions League knockout stage with 2 games to spare after beating Rennes 2-1 with goals from Callum Hudson-Odoi and Olivier Giroud, while Sevilla also qualified from the same group with a 2-1 victory over Russian side Krasnodar. Dortmund hammered Club Brugge to brighten their chances of progression, while Lazio also boosted their chances with victory over Zenit St. Petersburg. The Ministry of Youth and Sports Development, the minister, has asked the Nigerian Football Federation to demand better performance from the Super Eagles head coach Gennard Rohr following the team's uninspiring displays against Sierra Leone in the Africa Cup of Nations qualifying series. This followed his meeting with NFF officials today in Abuja to review the technical report of the games and recommend changes to the Super Eagles setup. That's it on Sports News. Ijama, back to you.
Thanks a lot, Olumide. And the main news again. The Senate today recommended that 1% of the proceeds from value-added tax should be channeled to the rebuilding of infrastructure destroyed in some states in the aftermath of the SARS protests in parts of the country. That's the news at 10 tonight. I'm Ijoma Onyato. Do stay safe and good night.